I will not sign away what belongs to me.
You imagine the world will ever honor a woman like you with such power?
What you call weakness is the truth standing unshaken.
Truth bends before process, before power.
The room fell into a silence that weighed more than words, the kind that makes even the ticking clock sound like judgment. Angela's eyes did not flinch, though every shadow in that office seemed designed to swallow her resolve. Across the table, Richard's calm mask cracked for the briefest moment, as if he too sensed that power built on fear had finally met its match. What followed would not just decide a signature on paper, but whether truth itself could rise against the comfort of corruption. This is only the beginning, and what comes next will be even more gripping. If you felt the tension in this moment, leave a single word in the comments: justice. And don't forget to follow so you will not miss what happens when the battle truly begins. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, a thin chill settling over the plastic chairs, and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. At the nurse's station, a wall clock ticked with patient indifference, though its face meant little to Angela Carter. In that room, time had already chosen sides. She stood by the foot of the bed, while David Whitman adjusted the blankets as if kindness could be staged, and Margaret Whitman's pearls clicked together whenever she turned her head to glance at Angela, the way some people appraise a misdelivered package. Charlotte lounged near the window with her phone face down, the posture of someone pretending not to watch a show she herself had produced. A folder lay open on the tray table, freshly printed papers, a black pen, a notary stamp waiting to bless a story that was not true. "Just sign here, and it will be over," David said, his voice made of silk and distance. "You will receive $20,000 to start fresh." The words landed as if they had been practiced in a mirror. Margaret added, with the smile of a hostess closing a door, "A gracious settlement for someone in your circumstances." Angela heard the sentence for what it was, an announcement of where they believed she belonged. She kept her posture easy, one hand resting on the tray table, the other tucked into the pocket of her camel coat. Across the hall, a volunteer guided a family toward the elevators. The squeak of a cartwheel wove a soft rhythm under everything. The television mounted in the corner of the room murmured about weather rolling down from the Sierras, a modest rain that might visit the city by evening. Outside, San Francisco moved along as it always did. Buses sighing, fog considering its entrance, people making choices they would have to live with. "I want to read everything," Angela said. And she did. Every page, eyes quiet and steady. She noted the clauses that pretended fairness, the careful arrangement of names, the address that once felt like a shelter. The pen lay beside the folder like a small, sharp invitation. She set it upright, then lowered it again, a gesture calm enough to be mistaken for hesitation. Charlotte shifted, impatience flaring. "We have all had a long morning. There is really nothing complicated here." Margaret lifted her chin. "It is best for everyone, dear. You will land on your feet. With the right people." The way she spaced the words told Angela that right meant white, and right meant money that arrived with a pedigree, and right meant circles into which Angela would always be escorted but never invited. The nurse stepped in to check the machine and, sensing the air, performed her work quickly, polite as a whisper. Angela set the first page aside and looked at David. In the early days, he had studied her face like a beautiful map. Now he looked at her like a detour. "I appreciate the clarity," she said. "But clarity goes both ways." He spread his hands, rehearsed patience. "Of course, we only want what is fair." The word echoed, soft as a glove turned inside out. "Fair," Angela repeated, the taste of it steady on her tongue. She placed the pages back into order with a careful tap, squared the corners, and let her fingertips rest on the paper until the rustle of it stilled. Down the hall, an orderly laughed at something a doctor had said, and the sound traveled in, a brief reminder that beyond this room life continued to make its ordinary music. Angela observed the small details, the coffee ring on the rolling table, the hairline crack in the plaster near the window, the scuff on David's shoe where the leather had kissed the curb. She let herself see it all so that later, when memory tried to make the day kinder than it was, she would be able to disagree. "For what it is worth," Charlotte said, "no one wants a scene. The word seen hovered, a warning dressed as concern. I do not, either, Angela replied, smoothing the top page. She thought of a street she would walk later, of a door she would close, of a desk she would unlock. She thought of how quiet truth could be before it changed everything. David, angle the tray table closer. We can have a notary in within a few minutes. He tapped the signature line as if distance were something that could be reduced to ink. Angela lifted the pen. The security camera in the corner watched with glassy patience. She lifted her face to it, as if to say, "See me not the version they are writing, but me." The pen felt cool between her fingers. She poised it above the paper, then lowered it, then let it rest, then lifted it again. "You will be able to put this behind you," Margaret assured, her smile tight as a bow. New beginnings can be a blessing when people know their place. The sentence held, without apology, what had always lived just under her tone. "May I have a glass of water?" Angela asked. The nurse brought it quickly, and Angela said, "Thank you," in the simple, practiced way people say grace without calling it that. She sipped, set the cup down, then signed her name in a steady hand on a page that did not decide the future, so much as acknowledge a present no longer worth preserving. She rolled without flinch, then set the pen down gently, as one might lower a small instrument after finishing a quiet song. David leaned forward, satisfied. Charlotte exhaled a delicate breath. Margaret's pearls rested where they always had, a mere decoration that believed itself a credential. The security camera, framed in the sterile corner of the ceiling, registered the moment. The composed line of Angela's mouth, the focus in her eyes, the way she kept her shoulders relaxed as if refusing to be posed by someone else's story. The scene did not announce itself as important. It never does. Importance often arrives as stillness, as a person choosing which part of herself to spend and which to save. "Someone from our office will follow up," David said, the relief in his voice a little too loud to be gracious. "You will have what you need to start over." He meant the sum they had chosen, wrapped in the ribbon of words like generous and fair. Angela nodded. "I will be fine," she said, and Margaret smiled as if she had received a confession. "Of course you will," Margaret answered. "A woman who knows her limits usually is." In nascent, Angela looked out at the slice of sky visible beyond the window, low clouds combed into order by a wind she could not feel. She closed the folder and slid it toward David with a movement so calm it was almost kind. The nurse returned with a form to confirm that forms had been signed. Angela initialed where asked, thanked the woman again, and the nurse's eyes, quick and human, met hers for a heartbeat longer than custom required. A small exchange the kind strangers make to tell each other that the world is not only made of the people who speak the loudest. "Your coat," Charlotte said, offering it as if the gesture erased the last half hour. Angela slipped her arms into the sleeves, buttoned the top button, and checked the pocket by habit. Everything was where it should be. David stood, rehearsing concern. "Do you have a ride?" "I do," Angela said. He hesitated as if there were a tender phrase he might still borrow, then thought better of it. Margaret smoothed the blanket. "We wish you the best," she offered, as one might to a contestant who had not advanced. Angela tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and turned toward the door. In the hall, the air felt cooler, freer. Footsteps passed, wheels turned, a distant elevator chimed its progress. She moved without hurry, refusing to grant them the spectacle of a retreat. The volunteer from earlier guided another family by speaking softly in Spanish and then in English, the ease of a bilingual kindness that had never been taught at any finishing school. At the corner, Angela paused and looked back into the room. David was already lowering himself onto the bed as if he were the injured party. Charlotte reassembling the folder, Margaret preparing the expressions she would use when she explained to friends that the matter had been handled with grace. Angela continued toward the elevator. She pressed the button and, while she waited, watched her reflection in the brushed metal doors. A woman in a camel coat, eyes steady, mouth quiet. She thought of a gallery where the light fell just so on a framed photograph, of a locked drawer with an arrangement of documents that told a different story, of a phone call she would make before the afternoon dimmed into evening. A man in scrubs rolled by, offering her a nod. She nodded back. The elevator arrived with a softened sigh. As the door slid open, she stepped inside, pressed the ground floor, and let the hum of descent cradle her for a few seconds more. When the doors opened again, the lobby spread out like a polite farewell. A gift shop selling flowers, a caf counter with drip coffee and muffins, a family arguing gently about parking validation. She crossed the tile, the click of her heels discreet and even. Outside, the city had decided on a wind after all. It moved across the plaza and tugged at the edges of her coat. A bus hissed to a stop. A cyclist drifted through the intersection. Somewhere a siren rose and fell like it remembered him. She adjusted the strap of her handbag on her shoulder and started down the steps. Each footfall deliberate, the afternoon leaning toward its next version. Angela left the hospital, the cold wind slipping under her coat. In her handbag, she gripped a USB drive. Late daylight slanted through the high panes of the museum, turning the polished concrete floors into quiet water and washing the white walls with a patient glow. Angela Carter stood near a photograph of the bay at low tide, her name tag pinned neatly to her blouse, her hair pulled back the way docents often wear it when they need both hands free. Couples drifted from frame to frame with the slow attention of people who have paid to be unhurried. A child counted in whispers the ships in the painting and lost track after 4, starting again with the solemnity of a prayer. From the atrium cafe rose the soft hiss of steam and the low thrum of conversation. A city's voice turned down to museum volume. The afternoon had the kind of calm that hides intent. In her handbag, resting upright like a book ready to be opened, a small drive held what the morning had warned her she would need. She greeted visitors, offered directions, and adjusted a subtle rope stanchion so no one stepped too near a fragile sculpture. She was outwardly ordinary, the way a lighthouse is ordinary from the landside. When the woman in the navy raincoat asked for the nearest elevator, Angela pointed and said, "Past the counter," then left. And the woman thanked her as if good manners were still a kind of currency. She was thinking of the hospital hallway, the smell of antiseptic and coffee, the sound of a pen settling on paper. She was thinking of how a signature could be both a period and the beginning of a new paragraph. The museum's light was kind, but the day's logic remained unflinching. A familiar voice reached her without turning heads. "Looking for a piece that speaks to me," Melissa Green said, setting a hand on the edge of the display case as though appraising its workmanship. Her red scarf was looped loosely and her tote bag held a wrapped book, the sort of prop a regular patron might carry. Melissa's smile was equal parts ease and message. She had the look of someone browsing, which is to say, listening. "The small prints upstairs are underappreciated," Angela replied, gesturing toward the stair. She began to walk, Melissa falling to step a bit behind, the distance between them exactly what two acquaintances might keep while talking about light and line. They moved along a corridor where one wall carried black and white portraits, each face turned toward the same invisible sound. Angela paused before a photograph of a woman standing in the field in winter, her skirt tucked by wind. Angela leaned in as if admiring the grain. "Isabel found the folder," Melissa murmured. "Behind the dresser mirror, bank letters, transfers, some schedule notes. She was careful. She brought copies. She's frightened." Angela nodded almost imperceptibly. "She is right to be careful," she said, her voice the lightest thread of sound. "We will protect her." She straightened and addressed a couple who had approached with a map, offering directions to a special exhibition as if the word protect belonged there, as if all museums exist for it. When the couple moved on, she let her gaze return to the winter photograph. "Do not keep the originals in your apartment," Melissa said. "Isabel can hold nothing dangerous at home. I have a lockbox. I checked it this morning." Angela turned slightly, tracking the subtle shift of her own pulse as if it were part of the exhibit. "And the accounts?" she asked. "Patterns? Regular transfers from your joint account into an entity that only pretends to be his family's," Melissa answered. "The routing repeats every first Monday. The description fields try too hard. There are also payments to a restaurant he favors." He signed as if his name were the receipt. People narrate their guilt," Angela said. "They cannot help it." She let the sentence sink to the floor between them like a dropped glove. From the atrium, a bell sounded softly to mark the hour, and with it, the small migration of visitors who always turn at the same time to see where the sound came from, even when they already know They descended to the cabin with the casualness of people who have decided art is best considered with coffee. The air smelled of espresso and warm pastry. A barista called out orders with a kindness that did not waste itself on performance. Angela ordered a latte, and when the bill arrived, she added the tip the way she always had. A steady hand offering a steady gratitude. Melissa paid for a tea tipping as well, because a habit of respect is also a record one leaves behind. At a two-top near the window, they sat with their cups. Outside, Market Street held its afternoon theater. A streetcar gliding by, a cyclist negotiating a turn with a practiced shoulder glance, a man in a reflective vest guiding a delivery truck as if steering a ship into harbor. Inside, the small spoons made small sounds. Angela stirred her latte once, then twice, letting the swirl settle. She pictured the driver in her handbag as a lighthouse lens she could rotate, sending one beam toward a bank, one toward a law office, one toward the room where a daughter tried to become the kind of woman her mother would not have had to be brave for. I went through the transfers on the USB, Melissa said, opening her tote and sliding a slim folder across the table under the quiet of her open palm. It is worse than we guessed. There are 4 signatures on a deed addendum, and there is correspondence from Richard Hale's office about a schedule. Meetings labeled as lunches are not lunches. His patterns always thought themselves clever, Angela said. And then she leaned in, her voice a hush meant for one person and the wall beyond. David has no idea that every stream of money leaves a trace. And they sat for a moment with the sentence, watching the city count its breaths. A dozen badge catches light differently than a CEO's lanyard, but either can be armor if worn with intent. Angela felt the familiar steadiness gather within her, like a tie she had chosen to match rather than resist. She could see the path of the week unfolding. A call placed not from her apartment, but from a quiet room elsewhere. A request to a firm that did not list its clients on its website. A meeting that would be arranged where someone else believed he held a pen. A group of retirees in windbreakers took the table beside them, discussing a landscape painter with the frank curiosity of people who are old enough to admit when they do not understand and therefore want to. One of them asked Angela whether a certain gallery would be crowded on a Saturday morning. Less than a Saturday afternoon, she said, and the woman laughed, a clear note that made the tea in its cup look warmer. It pleased Angela that she could be part of the ordinary kindness of a day, even while making plans that would not be ordinary at all. Isabel is safe for now, Melissa said. She was worried about her job. I told her, there are laws, and there is us. She believes you. Belief is a bridge, Angela said. We will make sure it reaches the other side. She lifted her cup and took a slow sip, then looked at the folder again. As one might study a coastline before setting out, we will need a statement ready in case any of this goes public before we intend. Not sensational, measured, true. I will draft language tonight, Melissa replied. Plain words, simple cadence, the kind that holds on radio, the kind that can be read aloud without tripping. She paused. And there is one more thing. A small account in the name of a company that does not exist, paying recurring charges at that restaurant on California Street. Receipts signed with a flourish that looks like a man pleased with himself. Pride loves the surface, Angela said. We will give it a mirror. She stood, gathering her handbag and sliding the folder back toward Melissa. No copies, leave your lockbox until we need them. Call the firm, use the secure number, ask for the partner whose name does not appear first. He is the one who closes the circle. Again, they carried their cups to the return tray and thanked the barista, who nodded as if a small blessing had been exchanged. On the way back through the galleries, they paused at a piece Angela always lingered over. A thin line cut into a broad canvas, the art of subtraction made visible. I like how it refuses panic, Melissa said. How the whole space changes around one decision. One decision, Angela echoed. Not desperate. Exact. They drifted apart near the mezzanine, so their exit would not read as a pair. Angela returned to the floor with her name tag centered and her attention generous. She knelt to adjust the angle of a placard where a child could read it without leaning too far. She answered a question about membership benefits with the tone of someone who has long ago learned that Courtesy is a form of strength. She watched a young couple stand far too close to a sculpture in order to take a photograph and kindly reminded them that the best images are taken one step back. She moved through the afternoon as if walking a shoreline where waves sometimes surprise the ankles, but never swept a person off their feet unless that person turned away at exactly the wrong moment. By late afternoon, the light changed, winter pale even in early fall, tilting toward the gold that makes chrome and glass look like instruments. Angela checked her watch, not for the hour so much as for the rhythm she had promised herself to keep. She would close the day at the museum, walk 3 blocks to a small office she rented under another name, make 2 calls from a landline, then take a ride across town with a view of the bridge so large it rearranged the fretwork inside her chest. Near closing, Melissa reappeared briefly at a distance, eyes meeting Angela's for the fraction of a second that meant everything had been filed and nothing had been lost. The security guard began his gentle pass through the galleries, reminding visitors with a smile that beauty must rest like everyone else. Angela thanked him, thanked the last guests, and collected a stack of brochures from the information desk as if any of it were ordinary. She stepped out onto the museum steps and stood for a moment in the polite wind that San Francisco keeps in its pocket for afternoons like this. The sky felt close enough to speak to. Her phone vibrated in her coat. She glanced down, saw the name she expected, and let the city's hum align with the breath she drew to meet it. The phone rang. David called, asking to meet tonight at Pacific Union Club. The rain began as a suggestion in the streetlights, a mist that made the pavement shine and the city's edges soften. Angela Carter stepped from the rideshare and paused beneath the portico of the Pacific Union Club, breathing in the faint scent of wet eucalyptus that drifted up the hill from the park. A valet opened the door with a polite nod and the kind of careful distance she had come to recognize. A calculus of class performed in the space of a single glance. Inside, a chandelier spilled warm light across marble, and a receptionist with perfect posture looked up with a smile that brightened half a degree when David Whitman appeared behind Angela as if to sponsor her presence. The lobby hummed with low conversation, men in dark suits, women in soft fabrics that whispered wealth, and the unwavering certainty of belonging. A server in a crisp jacket gestured toward the dining room. Angela thanked him, and when he stepped aside, he lingered a beat too long, as if weighing whether to direct her to the staff corridor. She held his gaze just long enough to fold that moment into memory without turning it into a scene. It had been a long day already. The museum's clean light still echoed in her chest, and with it, the clarity she had spent the afternoon gathering. Now the club's red velvet, its nods of old friends, and its slow rotation of prearranged smiles pulled at the edges of her patience, the way certain music does. Insistently, David intercepted her with a measured grin, the kind he used in photographs taken for annual reports. He offered her a quick embrace that could be read as affection from a distance and as choreography up close. "You made it," he said, guiding her to a corner table near a window where the city spread out below, newly polished by the rain. 2 place settings were already waiting, flanked by a 3rd chair, slid back just enough to suggest it had been added without being asked. Margaret Whitman arrived with Charlotte at her side, and within heartbeats, the 3rd chair belonged to Vanessa Hale, her hair glossy, her diamond ear studs having their quiet say. "Angela," Margaret said, the sound of her name shaped like a favor. "Lovely to see you out." Angela inclined her head. "Good evening." David signaled the server, who produced a bottle with a practiced flourish. The label faced the table like a credential. Vanessa's smile widened as she explained the vineyard story, as if reciting pedigree could substitute for taste. A busser refilled water, hovering near Angela, as if checking a reservation that had never been confirmed. The server poured a tasting for David, who swirled and approved. Margaret's pearls gleamed against a navy dress, her posture that of a woman who expects to be photographed well. "Before we begin," Vanessa said, lifting her glass, "I would love to make a small toast." She looked toward the center of the room, where a cluster of familiar faces pressed toward their own narratives. "To new beginnings," she declared, "and to the grace it takes to know when a chapter has ended." Her glass caught the chandelier's twinkle, and nearby conversations dipped the way they do when people sense a performance. Charlotte kissed her teeth in a smile. Here, here. Angela raised her glass by an inch, the way one acknowledges a plane of sound without entering it. She watched the room, absorbed the toast, and returned to its previous volume, as if it had never been interrupted but merely ornamented. A server approached with menus. Angela thanked him, and he blinked, startled by the acknowledgement, as if he had not expected eye contact to come with the word. The halibut is excellent tonight, he offered. So I have heard, Angela replied. Margaret examined the menu without reading it, then set it down as if menus were a courtesy in restaurants where everyone already knew what to order. Angela, she said, I do hope this evening brings clarity. It is exhausting for everyone to live in uncertainty. She smiled, and the smile tasted of lemon pith. And perhaps you can imagine how difficult it is for a family like ours when someone does not fit our world. Charlotte leaned in, elbows on the linen. It is not personal, it is structural. She delivered the line as if announcing a weather pattern. Vanessa studied Angela's face the way some people study a painting they do not understand and therefore condescend to. Certain rooms, Vanessa said lightly, ask for a certain language. Angela folded her napkin across her lap and let her hands rest. Rooms become kinder when people do, she said. The server returned to take orders. Angela asked questions about the preparation that let the server do his job, listened to the answers, and chose the fish. It was a diner's smallest act of dignity, to be present in one's own appetite. David ordered the steak without looking, the choice of a man who liked to be predictable when it cost him nothing. Margaret made a small point of declining bread. Charlotte ordered the pasta, then changed her mind after the words had landed, a habit she had long mistaken for charm. While they waited, David placed a discreet leather folder on the table. He smoothed its cover with 2 fingers, then opened it to reveal a stack of papers and a pen tucked through the spine as if already in motion. Let us not make a fuss, he said gently. We have arranged a settlement that honors the time and resources invested. He paused as though giving a eulogy for something that had not died. You will be able to move forward. Vanessa reached into her handbag and produced an expensive pen of her own, laying it beside the leather folder with a kind of ceremony. It is a clean break, she said. People respect decisiveness. Margaret nodded, her pearls answering in their language. It will be better for you, she added. That is not always easy to hear, but it is true. One must be realistic about circles. The word circles floated there, perfectly drawn, no smudge in the stroke, the loop close to entrance. A couple at the next table ordered oysters, and the briny scent rushed in from the platter as if the ocean had slipped off its shoes to rest. The server refilled water. Angela watched a droplet run down the carafe and gather itself on its way. She thought of Melissa at the museum, of the thin folder that had felt heavy with its contents, of the USB sitting upright like a lighthouse lens. She thought of Isabel behind a dresser mirror peeling back paper to reveal a truth that had always been there, waiting for bravery to lift it. Angela, David said quietly, the sooner we handle the paperwork, the sooner we can all breathe. He pulled a checkbook from his jacket as casually as some men produce a tip. He wrote with quick confidence, the angle of his hand expressive, then slid the paper toward her, as if it were a gift. This is from our joint account, he announced, not to her but to the air, to the gallery of witnesses who glanced while pretending not to. It shows good faith. Angela rested her hand on the table, the pulse at her wrist steady. She could feel the room waiting, leaning into a version of her it preferred, grateful, small, vanished. A server arrived with their plates, and the choreography of delivery gave her a breath. She thanked him again, and he nodded with a tiny, unexpected warmth. It was a small rebellion to count kindness as wealth and to spend it freely. She took a bite of the fish. It was tender, lemon bright, perfectly salted. She took her time. When she set down her fork, she placed it gently, offering the moment the dignity of a pause. Vanessa tipped her glass toward Angela's plate with a smile that thought it was a secret. Enjoy, she said. You will not always be eating like this. Charlotte laughed at a volume that drew 2 glances, then looked pleased with herself for having taken space on behalf of a joke. Margaret's eyes softened in the theater of concern. This is kinder than it looks, she said. A woman in your position is rarely offered so much. Angela lifted her water and drank. Positions have a way of changing, she answered, her tone even, as if discussing tides, sometimes all at once. She laid the glass down and looked out the window toward the glittering city where lights stitched their patient embroidery across the hills. The rain intensified, then softened, then resumed, a conversation the sky had with itself. The server returned with the wine and poured generously for Margaret, whose smile returned to its default glow. David tapped the leather folder. "Shall we?" he asked. The word shall built like an archways over which he expected her to pass. He placed the pen in the center of the placemat like a compass. Angela lifted it, weighing its balance, then set it down again. The faintest click swallowed by the room. She folded her napkin, unfolded it, and folded it again, not as a stalling tactic, but as a courtesy to her own patience. "There will come a time when you see how wrong you were," she said softly, answering not a question, but a posture. The line had been waiting in her chest, threaded and ready. Vanessa blinked, amused. "Boldness is attractive," she observed. Margaret looked almost pleased, as if daring Angela to make a spectacle that would confirm every assumption. Charlotte leaned back, crossed one leg over the other, and studied the room to see whether it was watching. David drew the check closer to himself, held it up like a document in a deposition, then placed it beside the folder with a flourish. From the shared account, he repeated, clear enough for adjacent tables, proof that good faith exists. He signed the restaurant slip with the same confident motion and left a tip that was meant to be seen. The server collected the folder to make space, mistaking the papers for part of the billing ritual. David reclaimed them, and the server murmured an apology with professional grace. Angela's eyes met the server's for an instant. A quick acknowledgement that people sometimes get in the way of what they cannot know. Conversations around them rose and fell, a tide that wanted the moon's attention. Angela set her hands on either side of her plate and lifted her chin. The smallest adjustment in posture that changed the room's math. She did not argue. She did not explain. She let the performance complete itself, because some endings are best allowed to exhaust their own applause. When the plates were cleared and the mirror-bright spoons for dessert arrived, she declined coffee and dessert alike. "I have an early morning," she said. Margaret offered a sympathetic hum that meant, "You would you not?" Standing, Angela slid her chair in as if returning it to the shape of the table. "Thank you for dinner," she said. David nodded. Vanessa's smile sharpened a degree. Charlotte glanced at her phone, the posture of someone who enjoys rehearsing indifference. The mattress appeared with Angela's coat, and when he settled it across her shoulders, he did so with a professional kindness that made her want to memorize his name. She thanked him, and the syllables of his reply carried the relief of being seen. At the podium, she paused to express appreciation to the server for his attention. He wished her a good night in the voice people use when they are careful around sadness. She descended the front steps into air that smelled of wet stone and bay wind. The club's lamps drew halos on the slick pavement, and her reflection followed her in broken pools, here and gone and here again. A taxi rolled past, its meter light off. A bus sighed as it gathered passengers. Somewhere a cable car clanged a bell that sounded like nostalgia made mechanical. She moved down one flight, then another, careful on the damp, elegant stairs, her hand grazing the cool iron rail as if to greet the hill itself. Angela left the table, walked into the rain-glossed night, and started down the wet steps. Melissa was waiting by the car, opened the door, and whispered, "We have evidence from Isabel." Rain threaded the glass with silver lines, each drop catching a strand of city light and letting it go. The windows looked east toward the bridge, its cables ghosted in mist, the bay a dark sheet ruled with quick strokes of wind. In the quiet rooms of her Soma apartment, Angela Carter set a small metal box on the kitchen island and turned the key. The faint click sounded larger than it was. She had been carrying the echo of the club all evenings. The velvet hush, the practiced smiles, and beside it, Melissa's whisper outside the car. Evidence from Isabel. Now, with the building's heater humming through the vents and a siren passing 2 blocks away like a thought that could not help raising its voice, she opened the lid. Inside lay a neat geometry of envelopes, a compact recorder, 2 flash drives, and a thin notebook with dates written in a steady hand. Angela did not rush. She washed her hands, dried them on a soft towel, and made tea. The steam rose in a calm column as if the cup were practicing prayer. She set her phone face down and turned on a lamp that threw a warm circle across the island, then drew the notebook close. The top page held a list: bank letters, transfer schedules, a law office memo header copied by hand, timestamps paired with shorthand descriptions. The words carried no drama, only weight. Melissa arrived a few minutes later, a knock that matched their arrangement to gentle taps, a pause, then one more. Her coat was damp at the shoulders, and she shook a few raindrops from her scarf before hanging it on the back of a chair. She did not sleep, Melissa said softly, sliding into the light. She was afraid the documents would be found before she could get them to us. She's brave, Angela, and careful. Careful keeps brave alive, Angela answered. She poured tea into a second cup and pushed it across. Tell me everything, and tell me slowly. Melissa opened an envelope and drew out color scans secured with a paperclip. Behind the dresser mirror, she said, laying the first page flat. He taped a false backing, then tucked folders into the wall space. She dusted around that mirror for months, and last week the corner of the tape lifted. She thought it was a poorly repaired crack. Then she realized it moved. Way done, Angela studied the page. Transfer confirmations, each with a date and a description that tried too hard to be ordinary. Regular withdrawals on the first Monday, Melissa continued, into an entity with a trustworthy name. The letterhead looks legitimate until you look closely. The registered address is a mail drop. The description fields say things like client dinner or project retainer. There is also a set of emails printed out from a law office, meeting notes that talk about alignment and asset rebalancing. They do not say theft, but they do not have to. Pride always narrates itself, Angela said. She traced one line with her finger, not touching the ink, just hovering, as if outlining a coastline she had every intention of reaching. And the restaurant charges? Recurring, Melissa said. Paid by a small company that does not exist outside of a folder in his head. The signatures on the receipts are flourish. He wanted to see his name perform. Angela let out a slow breath. The heater clicked off, and the apartment's quieter air made the rain sound closer. A cable car bell carried thin and far from Powell. With calm, deliberate movements, she fitted the first drive into her laptop and opened the directory. The screen filled with folders named by month, each held images, spreadsheets, audio files, labeled by date and time. She clicked one. Isabel's voice a little breathy, the vowels rounded with music described pulling the mirror, the manila folders within, the way her hands trembled and then steadied. The apartment's doorbell startled them both, a soft chime that did not belong to danger. Angela checked the peephole and opened. Isabel stood there beneath the hood of a raincoat, her dark hair damp and gathered, her eyes bright with nerves and resolve. She clutched a reusable grocery bag as if it contained apples and bread instead of what it did. I'm sorry to come late, she began, and Angela shook her head. You came at the right time, Angela said, stepping aside. Please, sit. Take off your coat. Tea is already made. Isabel eased into the chair Melissa had pulled back and wrapped chilled fingers around the cup. I keep thinking I will wake up from this, she said. At first I did not want to touch anything, but I remember what you told me about trusting my instincts and taking photos, not originals, when I can. You did exactly right, Angela said. Tell it your way. Isabel nodded, composed herself, and began. He was careless because he was proud, she said. He hides things at the house like he lives alone. Behind the mirror, inside a shoebox in the closet, taped under a drawer. I found the mirror first. The letters were there. He wrote dates on the tabs as if he wanted to admire how organized he was. She smiled, small and rueful. I took pictures with my phone. Then I printed them at the shop down the block where the clerk is a friend. I paid cash. I deleted the files. I checked the trash and deleted that too. Melissa and Angela listened without interrupting, their attention patient as whitewater. The rain sped up, softened again. Somewhere a neighbor laughed at a television show, then turned down the volume. Isabel told them about overheard conversations, names of restaurants, a mention of a meeting in the financial district where someone said the word finalized 3 times as if the repetition itself were a notarization. She told them about a receipt for dinner where she had served wine, then had been handed a cash tip so large she felt insulted by the attempt to mend her silence. When she finished, Angela reached across and rested her hand over Isabel's for a moment. You did something hard and right, Angela said. We will make sure doing right does not cost you your life. If anyone approaches you, you call me. If anyone threatens your job, you call Melissa. We will not let you stand alone on this. Isabel nodded, tears balanced but not falling. I believe you, she said. That is why I am not as scared as I was. She took a steadying sip of tea. I did not bring originals. I hid them in the place he will not think to look, and I will not go back for them unless you say so. Good, Angela said. For tonight, this is enough. She turned back to the laptop and clicked through audio file snatches of a phone call. The quiet of a parked car where a conversation drifted through a cracked window, the clink of glass in a restaurant where people performed generosity for each other. She opened a spreadsheet that Melissa had prepared and watched the columns line themselves up into sense. His pattern is greedy, Angela said. Greed makes a rhythm. Rhythm makes a map. Melissa added new figures as they spoke, her pencil scratching softly. I will put this copy in the lockbox before midnight, she said. Another copy goes to the firm when you say, Isabel must carry nothing that can be used against her. Angela, you should not keep more than a single drive here. If you need, I can take it. In an hour, Angela replied. I will pull what I need for the call, then you take both drives. I do not intend to sleep very much. They ate simple food, at the island sliced fruit, toasted bread, a little honey, because care for the body is part of any durable plan. Isabel's shoulders lowered the tea working through her like a warm permission to rest. The old wooden clock on the bookshelf clicked its way toward later. The apartment settled into the hour when streets thin and decisions clarified. Angela printed a short list and read it aloud. Each item a step on a bridge. Secure storage. Counsel under privilege. Statement language in plain words. Safety protocol for Isabel. Call to a partner whose name is not on the door, she said. Then, a meeting request that looks like surrender, scheduled on their terms, held on mine. Day. Melissa pulled out her phone and opened the encrypted app. I can have a draft statement by morning, she said. We can keep the cadence, simple words that read smoothly when spoken, numbers written as words, dates as phrases, no sharp corners for the voice to scrape against. Thank you, Angela said. I wanted to sound like truth and not like triumph. She turned to Isabel. If anyone asks where you were tonight, tell them you were at your sister's. If they ask which one, tell them the name we have agreed on. If they ask what you were doing, tell them you were watching a movie. Do not add details you will have to remember. Isabel nodded. I can do that, she said. She stood, wrapping her coat around her. I should go before the rain gets worse. At the door, she hesitated. He talks about me as if I am furniture, she said. Today, I realize that, to him, I am furniture that can move. She lifted her chin. I am not. No, Angela said, and in her voice lived the whole choir. You are not. After Isabel left, Melissa gathered the drives and the slim folder into a waterproof pouch. I will take these now, she said. Text me when you are done with the notes, and I will circle back for anything else. Angela walked her to the door. The hallway smelled faintly of Sumson's tomato sauce, of clean laundry, of rain brought indoors by the cuffs of a coat. Be careful, Angela said. But do not be afraid. Nah, those are different things, Melissa answered and smiled. I remember. The elevator arrived with a soft bell and carried her away. Alone again, Angela went to the window and looked at the bridge. The fog had shifted, revealing the middle span like a sentence missing its beginning and end. She rested her forehead briefly against the cool glass and then returned to the island. With slow precision, she organized the remaining papers, aligning their edges until they felt like a promise kept to order. She checked the lock on the door, filled a glass with water, and sat with her notebook. She thought of the country club's chandelier and of the way a woman had told her, without saying the words, that certain rooms do not speak her language. She thought of the museum and of the photograph of a woman in a field in winter, her skirt pulled by wind, her face turned towards something that perhaps only she could hear. She thought of a field of data points that, taken together, pronounced one sentence over and over, now. Her phone buzzed once, face down on the counter. the vibration traveling through the wood like the second hand of a clock. She turned it over and saw no emergency, only a calendar reminder she had set earlier in the week as a test. She deleted it. She closed her eyes briefly and took 3 slow breaths, the kind an on-air voice takes before the red light. She opened her eyes, lifted the pen, and wrote a single line at the top of the page, an intention written as both oath and forecast. They think I am the outsider. They are about to see who I am. The rain, as if agreeing, eased to a patient patter. A distant motorcycle stitched past on Folsom, then quiet returned. Angela checked locks again, turned off the lamp by the window, and stood in the kitchen's warm circle of light. She could feel fear looking for a perch. She refused it one. She could feel anger asking for a microphone. She gave it a page instead. The night stood open before her like a clean hallway. Her phone lit with a new message, its glow small and insistently plain. She read the words once, then once again letting their presumption finish announcing itself. A message from David appeared on the screen. Tomorrow, come to Hale's office. Final signing. Morning thinned to a pale gold that glass could hold, and the towers of the financial district lifted their shoulders into a sky cleared by night rain. The elevator in Richard Hale's building moved with the silence of money well spent, carrying Angela Carter upward past polished lobbies and conference rooms where voices learned to write a whisper. When the doors parted, she stepped into a corridor where the carpet softened every footfall, and the framed photographs of yachts and vineyards practiced their quiet argument about what permanence looks like. A receptionist with a headset and a steady smile rose as though announced by an invisible bell. They are ready for you, she said, the words shaped by habit into hospitality and hierarchy at once. The conference room looked west toward the Transamerica Pyramid, its angled face catching the kind of light that turns edges into pronouncements. A long walnut table ran the length of the window wall, the wood gleaming the way instruments do when tuned. Carafes of water stood like glass sentries beside neat stacks of paper. On the far side, David Whitman faced the door with a calm he had borrowed from mirrors. Vanessa Hale sat lean and poised, a bracelet bright at her wrist. Richard Hale stood with his back half turned to the city, then turned the rest of the way to her, the practiced smile of a man greeting a rival he refuses to name. Near the corner, Margaret and Charlotte Whitman took their seats as if they had always belonged there, pearls and posture making the case they knew best. 2 firm associates arranged folders with the deliberation of people who have been told that paper is the true weather. And as Carter Richard said, offering his hand, "We appreciate your willingness to make this orderly." The word orderly landed like an instruction. David pulled out a chair as if to perform a chivalry that cost him nothing. Angela sat, her coat folded over the back of the chair, her handbag placed on the floor by her right foot where it would seem demure and be near her hand. The room's air carried the faintest trace of coffee and furniture polish, the smell of mornings spent making decisions about other people. She took in every small thing, the pen resting atop a clean legal pad at her place, the picture beaded with condensation, the barely audible click of the wall clock, counting an hour it believed belonged to them. She let her gaze touch the window and then return. She felt her breath, long and even, the way a radio voice breathes before the light goes red. "Let us begin," Richard said. He lowered himself into his chair and tapped the folder before him with a knuckle. "We have prepared documents to finalize matters in a way that respects everyone's interests." Vanessa's smile agreed for him, a small tilt that preferred physics to truth. Margaret's nod joined the chorus. Speed, David added, "is a kindness." Angela folded her hands on the table and waited. Silence is a tool in rooms like this. It persuades the impatient to explain themselves twice. Charlotte shifted, the crisp fabric of her skirt whispering a small impatience of its own. Richard offered a pen. "We can walk through the key points," he said. "Or, if you prefer, we can proceed directly to signatures. A notary is on site." Margaret glanced across the table with a look meant to appear gentle. "We are relieved you are here," she said. "This has been difficult, for everyone." She let the word everyone do a kind of arithmetic that subtracted what it could not see. "Perhaps after this," she added, "we can all find our proper place again." Indefined, 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 indefined. Angela took the pen, turned it in her fingers as if testing its balance, and set it down. She listened as Reacher summarized sections and clauses, how assets would be reclassified in a way that moved weight from one side of the scale to the other, while insisting the scale had remained true. She asked no questions. She let him complete the shape of his proposal. When he finished, David slid a check from his jacket pocket and placed it at an angle atop the folder, face down, but angled so that any glance would catch the number. From our shared account, he said for the room. A gesture of good faith. Good faith, Angela said quietly, does have a scent. She looked at the check without lifting it. I have come to recognize it. Vanessa leaned forward, her tone effortless. There is relief in clarity, she said. You will see that soon. Certain lives require certain rooms. The phrase held its usual temperature. Cool, precise, unconcerned about what it did not have to carry. Rooms, Angela replied, become what people ask of them. She reached down to her handbag, unlatched it without haste, and set a thin, unmarked folder on the table in front of her. Paper against wood makes a sound softer than thunder and louder than denial. She rested her palm on the cover for the space of one breath, then lifted it and slid the top page forward. The room did not yet understand what was happening, and so it continued to be itself. Richard's smile held, David's posture did not bend, Margaret laced her fingers, pearls settled into the place they always liked to rest. But the top page did its quiet work as pages do when they have been asked to tell the truth. It displayed a ledger of transfers from a joint account to an entity that did not live where it claimed, the dates regular and the descriptions over-eager. Beneath that were copies of emails with letterheads that believed themselves more dignified than the sentences they carried. Melissa's penciled notes in the margins translated euphemism into paper facts. Richard's face registered interest first, as if faced with a painting he wanted to admire before buying. Where did you acquire these? He asked, and the verb selected betrayed him. David reached for the top page and thought better of it. Vanessa's mouth made a small, contained shape. Your office, Angela said, and his habits. She turned another page. Forged signatures on an addendum. A shell company with a home that is a mailbox. A restaurant that receives loyalty disguised as business. At most, Richard said, you are describing misunderstandings. He turned to the associate. Fetch the notary. No, Angela said with pleasant firmness. Fetch the truth. The door opened before anyone could stand. 2 federal agents entered, jackets unbuttoned, identification presented with a choreography that carried neither apology nor threat, only the authority of a system done pretending it had not seen what it had. With them came a woman whose stride carried the sober calm of someone whose name does not have to go first on the firm's letterhead to be the person who closes circles. She greeted Angela by name, then placed a leather folder on the table, folding back the cover to reveal a neat stack of warrants whose ink had dried well before the elevator brought Angela up to this floor. Richard rose halfway, gathering words to meet them. The agent nearest him spoke with a ground in his voice. We are here regarding irregularities connected to this divorce proceeding and several related entities. We will be taking statements and certain materials. For the moment, please remain seated. David laughed, a short, polished sound that belonged elsewhere. This is ridiculous, he said. You cannot come into my attorney's office and Mr. Whitman, the agent said, the name clean as a bell. You may wish to speak with counsel, and you will have the chance. For now, remain seated. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The woman from the firm looked to Angela. If you would like to begin, she said, it would be useful. Angela inclined her head, then stood. The chair made a small sound against the carpet as she slid it back. She let her hands rest lightly on the table and lifted her face to the room. It was not a speech. It was a sentence long prepared and now placed where it belonged. My name is Angela Carter, she said, steady, and I am the chief executive of Carter Technologies, headquartered here in San Francisco. The accounts you have been discussing are mine. The house you have been living in belongs to me. The transfers you have arranged moved my money into the pockets of people who believed a woman like me would not be believed. No one spoke. Margaret blinked slowly, then took a breath that did not arrive where she had intended to send it. Charlotte's chin lifted a fraction, the posture of someone trying not to shrink. Vanessa reassessed with the efficiency of a person trained to survive proximity to power. Richard's smile did not know where to go, and therefore vanished. David found his mouth and did not find words. Angela slid the next page forward. Copies of receipts, the flourish of a signature that enjoyed the mirror. You sold information you did not own, she said. You took money that did not belong to you. You wrote me out of documents I paid to create, and you told yourself that I would accept a smaller story than the one I had built with my own hands. The agent's pen moved across a small notebook, not because he needed the note, but because writing sometimes shows people where their words have landed. The woman from the firm nodded once. Another agent at the door spoke softly into a lapel mic, and somewhere else someone said yes. For clarity, Richard tried. F. Carter, are you asserting? I am asserting the truth, Angela answered. She did not raise her voice. The room came closer anyway. Outside the window, a gust rippled a flag on the neighboring roof. It settled back, then lifted again, a simple lesson in returning. Margaret leaned forward, the room tilting toward a tone she had used for charity. Angela, she said, soft and aimed. Perhaps we can... Mrs. Whitman, Angela said, respectful as a seasoned anchor. I will not be taking your guidance today. She turned to the agent. The recordings are time-stamped. The financial files are backed up in multiple locations. The witness who discovered the documents did not remove originals. She is safe. She let the last word sit where everyone could see it. David found something he mistook for footing. This is a stunt, he said, but the sentence asked the room for laughter, and the room had moved on. The agent stepped forward, read names that everyone already knew, and read charges in a voice that made no weather of them. A second agent produced cuffs that did not announce themselves, but simply were. A third began lifting folders, sliding evidence into careful order. Vanessa started to speak and thought better of it. Richard glanced toward the hallway where the firm's own counsel were gathering, and for the first time his posture acknowledged the existence of a horizon he had not drawn. Margaret pressed her fingers into the edge of the table, and in that moment looked like a woman who had always believed the room would hold her, discovering that floors are not promises, they are surfaces. Angela did not move until the agents did. She watched the man who had called himself her husband stand because a uniform asked him to stand. Watched the woman whose bracelet gleamed, learn that shine does not argue with metal. Watched the lawyer who had placed himself at the center of other people's dramas arrive at the beginning of his own. She reached for her coat, slid her arms into its sleeves, and buttoned the top with the same care she had used when signing what had needed signing in another room on another day. At the door, the woman from the firm nodded to Angela, an acknowledgement between professionals that requires no signature. Angela returned the nod, then stepped into the hallway where the carpet dimmed footfalls and the air felt washed of performance. She did not look back. The elevator arrived as if it had been waiting for her alone. She pressed the button for the lobby and let the cables do their quiet work. In the lobby, the security guard glanced up and recognized nothing except her composure, which is to say, he recognized what mattered. Outside, late light collected on the faces of buildings, a soft gold arranged into compliments. The city sounded like a city saved from weather by its own angle. She stood for a second and let the breeze find her forehead, then began to walk, her steps measured to a tempo she had chosen rather than borrowed. She had promised herself mercy, and she kept the promise now, moving without hurry toward a door that would close behind her and open in front of someone else. Officers handcuffed David, Vanessa, and Richard. Margaret sank into a chair. Angela walked out of the room, late afternoon light falling across her steady face. News arrived the way morning light does in San Francisco, soft at first and then undeniable. Headlines stacked themselves on screens and papers. Voices on radio stations unfolded the story with a measured cadence reserved for disasters averted and masks removed. Angela Carter's name found its way into living rooms and kitchen nooks, into buses and barbershops, and the quiet space between a first sip of coffee and a second. Clips from the previous afternoon looped across television. A lobby's clean brightness, the discreet movement of federal agents, A woman in a camel coat walking out of a room that had been drafted against her and leaving it to its own air. She sat at a small table in the cafe near the Embarcadero, a place with black and white tile and a row of plants, learning to love the window. The barista wiped down the counter with a practiced figure 8 and called names in a voice that made every order sound like a favor granted. Commuters cupped warm cups in both hands and stared into the day, as if it would reveal itself with enough attention. Angela added the tip as she always did, set her phone face down, and watched the ferry building clock hold its steady console. Taylor, the server with a small anchor tattoo on his wrist, recognized her not as a headline, but as a regular who looked people in the eye. He brought an extra napkin and did not perform the gesture. He offered it and moved on. Melissa slid into the chair across from her, a folded newspaper tucked under her arm. Rain beaded on the shoulders of her coat where the sky had rehearsed a shower and changed its mind. "They are calling you the woman who never raised her voice," she said, setting the paper on the table, then turning it so the photos faced down, as if volume ever built a case. She wrapped her hands around her cup, then added, "Isabel is safe. She stayed with her sister last night. I checked the lock on the storage box before sunrise. The firm confirmed receiving the encrypted package. It was signed in by the partner who closes circles." Angela smiled, small and grateful. "Good," she said. "We will make the public statement at Stanford this afternoon. Plain words, steady cadence, truth, not triumph." She took a slow sip and let the warmth move through her like an answer. Two older women in knitted hats sat at the next table discussing the morning show. "I always said, you cannot tell what a person carries by her coat," one of them declared, polishing her glasses on the corner of a scarf. "Or by her quiet." The other nodded, took a bite of toast, and said, "She held herself like a new law. People forgot what that looks like. Their voices were gentle and matter-of-fact, a hymn without the music." Angela's phone buzzed and fell silent, respectful even in insistence. Messages lined up, congratulations that did not use exclamation points, reporters requesting quotes, invitations from programs that had never heard of her last week, and now spoke her name like a password to their relevance. She responded to none of them. She would speak when the words could lift more than her name. A man at the far end of the bar caught Taylor's sleeve. "Is that her?" he asked, low and curious. Taylor glanced over and shrugged. "That is a woman having her coffee," he said. The man laughed at himself, embarrassed, and left a tip that was not for show. Outside, a cable car bell carried lightly along the boulevard and the bay breathed its invisible salt. Before noon, they drove to the hospital, not because the building needed her, but because the story did. The waiting room had been repainted since the last time, the plastic chairs replaced with softer ones that asked less of backs. A new sign listed languages at the social work desk. A new stack of brochures offered help in words written for people who did not know help could spell their names. Angela stood where she had stood on that first day and looked at the clock. Not to know what time it was, but to understand how much had changed without moving his hands. Margaret Whitman sat in a corner beneath a muted television. The pearls she wore today seemed quieter, or perhaps a person who had mistaken jewelry for evidence learns that shine is only shine when the room agrees. Charlotte was by the window, phone in her palm, her posture the posture of a woman unused to having her voice sent to voicemail. For half a breath, no one spoke. An intake nurse rolled a cart past, the wheels humming, and the moment drew itself into focus. Margaret stood first. "Angela," she said, finding the name with care. "This has all been." She reached for a word that would not change its spots, and settled on one that would not bite. Complicated. Complicated is one way to say it, Angela replied. She did not move closer and did not move away. "For 3 years, I paid for a house, for cars in other pockets, for dinners in rooms that insisted they did not speak my language. For 3 years, I listened to theories about my place and watched you all hold hands with a lie that looked tidy." Charlotte lifted her gaze from the window to meet Angela's. There was less performance available in her face now. "We were wrong," she said. The admission did not apologize. It did not need to. It simply stood where it had been asked to. Angela considered them both with the same even attention she had given the hospital's volunteer that first day. "If you're asking me to spare you embarrassment," she said, "I did not build a foundation to practice old habits. There will be consequences. For your son, for your friends, for the people who thought money's a passport through fire. She tilted her head. I hope you learn how to stand in the smoke without pretending it is fog. Margaret's mouth trembled and regained itself. I did not understand, she said. That is not an excuse. No, Angela agreed. It is an origin. You can choose a different destination. She gestured toward the sign at the social work desk. There are people in this building who have to choose that every day without the benefit of pearls. She left it there. Neither punishment nor absolution, just the honest oxygen of a day that had started somewhere else. On the way out, a volunteer waved, and Angela waved back. A little boy in a superhero cape ran past and then paused to look up at her. He grinned, then ran on, cape leaning into a turn the way joy does when it forgets to be careful. By early afternoon, the Stanford auditorium filled with a kind of silence only crowds can make. Faculty sat alongside students, advocates alongside bankers, who had come because their compliance departments had insisted, and also because curiosity is a form of conscience. A sign on the wall read, Financial Justice Summit, in letters that did not shout. They did not have to. Melissa arranged a stack of printed statements at a table by the door and spoke with volunteers about where to direct people who needed to talk to a lawyer before they needed to talk to anyone else. Isabel stood near a display that explained how to document financial abuse. A modest plaque acknowledging anonymous contributors who understood the safety of names that do not travel. Backstage, Angela adjusted the lapel microphone and breathed the way a voice learns to breathe when it owes a room something tender and stern at the same time. The event coordinator counted down with fingers that moved like a conductor's, and then Melissa caught Angela's eye and nodded the nod that had been their signature since long before all this. We are ready. She stepped into the light, and the light stepped back, making space. She did not begin with gratitude, she began with a story. She spoke of a woman at a kitchen table, making a budget with a pencil nearly worn to nothing. She spoke of a bank statement that did not add up, and a spouse who turned truth into a weather report, changeable, deniable, no one's fault. She spoke of a daughter who watched her mother save in secret the way other people save heirlooms, and of a son who learned too early that shame does its best work when people do not speak. Then she named the numbers, the percentage of domestic abuse that includes money, the too small fraction of victims who have legal help, the years people lose to damage someone else designed. She told them what Carter Technologies had built software that listened for irregularity without listening for names, alerts that were in plain language, a help button that connected to a human being who would answer a phone and say the word you without accusation. She told them what the foundation would fund: clinics in hospitals, emergency stipends measured in rent and groceries, and uninterrupted phone plans, education for workers who see everything because they clean up after everything. She gave them dates written as sentences so a voice could read them aloud without tripping and so a mind could remember them without reaching. She did not declare victory, she offered a map. When she reached the part that required a promise, she paused. The auditorium held still. Even the air waited. Justice is not a prize that the powerful distribute, she said, each word clean enough to carry without a chaperone. It is the ground we're supposed to be walking on together. It is not only for those who already have a microphone. It is for everyone. The room did not applaud yet. It let the sentence take its place on the stage. During questions, a banker asked about unintended consequences and was answered with a story of a woman who kept her job because a flag triggered a conversation instead of a closure. A student asked how to help when you are not the one being harmed and was told, listen, document, accompany. An older man said he had lived long enough to mistrust slogans and wondered how to trust this. Angela nodded. Trust the work, she said. Do not trust me because I am at the podium. Trust me, because in 3 months, we will publish what we did and what we failed to do, and then we will go back and do more. Between sessions, in the hallway where coffee urns lined up like a small fleet, people approached her without jostling. A woman in a cafeteria uniform said, My sister needs this, and Angela pressed a brochure into her hand and asked a name. A groundskeeper with callous fingers touched the edge of the tablecloth and said, I saw you on the news. I hope they all have to look you in the eye. A young man from a shelter program asked for an internship application. Melissa promised to send him the form before evening. Isabel refilled the pamphlet stand and remembered the night she had knocked on Angela's door with rain dripping from her hood. She reminded herself to look up, to see how much had changed. By late afternoon, the last panel ended. People folded their programs and went out into the Stanford light, where eucalyptus leaves had scattered across the paths like small boats. Angela stayed to thank volunteers. She lingered in the quiet that follows work done in public, feeling the way the day had rearranged a set of old furniture inside her chest. Then someone from the local news asked for a comment, and she gave them one sentence that would sit well on air without turning the story into spectacle. "We are building the road as we walk," she said. That is how roads have always been built. The drive back to the city took them along the flats where the bay shows its whites and grays like a hand of cards no one can control. In the rearview mirror, the campus shrank to trees and then to a line where sky begins. Melissa scrolled through a list of messages and read out the ones that mattered. A state senator wanted a meeting. A community college had space for a clinic. A supermarket chain would host an information table near the pharmacy. Angela listened and said yes, where yes could be a door and not a promise she would regret. Evening balanced itself on the roofs. Lights came on in apartments where people were setting tables, the kind of choreography that keeps cities from forgetting themselves. Angela returned to her apartment for the first time that day and exhaled the way a building does when its windows are opened after being shut. She hung her coat, checked her logs, and stood in the kitchen where the metal box had been the night before. She poured water, sliced an apple, and set grace without saying it. Then she walked to the desk where the day's notes waited and wrote a line at the top of a clean page, published the outcomes, then the next actions, then the invitation. Later, she sat on her couch with a blanket pulled over her knees and listened to a radio program replaying the day's speech. The host spoke in a voice trained to be companionable in kitchens. He said her name as if it were something made by work rather than by wind. He described the room, the light, the kind of listening that had happened there. He did not use declarations. He used verbs, said, brought, changed, built. Messages from strangers arrived. A grandmother in Oakland who wanted to tell her that age can be a shield when asking questions. A cashier in Daly City who wrote that she saw strange charges on a friend's account last year and had not known what to call the feeling that followed. Angela answered two of them and saved the others for morning. She called Melissa to say thank you for a day that had needed both plan and improvisation. She called Isabel to say she would stop by later in the week with flowers that did not require a note. When she finally stood, the room held the hush that comes after conversation. When the house learns again that it is also a shelter, she set her alarm, though she did not intend to sleep late. She checked the door, the windows, the small habits that bring peace to a body that has learned how quickly peace can be taken. Then she gathered her notes and slid them into a folder, placed the folder beside her bag, and turned off the light. Morning light poured through the glass. Angela tightened her grip on the microphone, resolve bright in her eyes. The story ends here, but the journey of justice is only beginning. In the quiet that followed, it was not the sound of handcuffs or headlines that lingered, but the memory of a woman who chose steadiness over spectacle. Angela's journey had begun in shadows of betrayal and dismissal, yet it led to a truth so plain it could not be ignored. Her strength was not measured in raised voices or sudden victories, but in the patient, unshakable insistence that dignity belongs to everyone. The lesson is one older than law and newer than each morning. Love can mend what arrogance tried to erase, and mercy can stand taller than revenge. In the world still struggling with prejudice and misplaced power, it reminds us that healing begins where courage meets compassion. So let us carry this forward. Like the lamp that glows quietly in a window at night, even the smallest act of justice or kindness can guide someone through the darkest streets. If this story touched your heart, consider passing its warmth along to a neighbor, a friend, or a stranger who needs to know they are not alone.